There's a lot of things on my mind right now. I was thinking about the situation in Ethiopia. There's been um, violence in that country after the death of a popular singer. I may make a video on that time depending, but I've been following that closely over the last few days. I watched a historic debate between James Baldwin and William Buckley at Cambridge University in 1965. Um, and I've been following all the stories. But what I want to focus on with this video is the situation with Hong Kong. Um, it's very much been on my mind, but I haven't got around to making this video until now. So it's a tragedy, an utter tragedy. What has happened there? Basically, one country, two systems is effectively dead in everything but name. It's essentially the death of Hong Kong as it was known. Um, Let me just make a premise with this, and the premise is that it doesn't matter what the Chinese Communist Party says about this. I believe that they are professional liars. I don't believe a word of assurance that they make that this will only target criminals and troublemakers. I think it's sweeping. I think it's poorly defined. I'm talking about the new legislation, and it's profoundly dangerous. And there's speculation that not just the West, but specifically Britain is now in essentially a cold war with China. Um, it's profound, profound. It's very personal for me because a large part of my life was connected with mainland China. I lived and worked there twice. I have many Chinese contacts, still do. A lot of them I don't talk to about these issues. Um, but it's really a profound situation. So these new laws, this new legislation that's being drafted is going to be targeting sedition, terrorism, just looking at the report in the Times, um, sedition, subversion, terrorism, foreign collusion, and the threat is up to life imprisonment. Now the problem with this is it's so loosely defined that it's ripe for abuse. Joshua Wong and other young leaders of the pro-democracy movement, and that's a collective umbrella term. It's not the formal name of it, but they are bravely speaking out. But thousands of Hong Kongers are now deleting their online social media. The assurances by the Chinese state that this is only targeting violent criminals is would almost be funny if it wasn't so serious, because it is very clear that this is going to be a sweeping way of attacking anyone that's critical of Beijing, including foreigners. So foreigners who have went to Hong Kong to show solidarity with the protesters will also find themselves targeted. Not surprisingly, Liu Xiaoming, who's kind of the face of China, mainland China in the UK, has been speaking about how the UK is interfering in Hong Kong's affairs, Chinese affairs as they see it. They've even had the arrogance to say that our policy of making a pathway to citizenship for British nationals overseas, Hong Kongers, is counter to international laws. That is absolutely astonishing when you consider that it is the Chinese side that has absolutely torn up the Sino-British Joint Declaration, which was supposed to be in effect until 2047. It's now 2020. It's 27 years that they've just disregarded. Um, and I think it's absolutely despicable. I mean, it doesn't at all surprise me. The Chinese Communist Party is only interested in power. It's the only thing they're interested in. I'm not sure they're even that ideological anymore. I don't even think that they're guided by kind of Maoist doctrine, particularly, or even Marxist-Leninist doctrine. I honestly think this is a regime that is solely interested in maintaining an iron grip on power. There are so many things that have been going on there in recent years that are any one of them in themselves could be really a damning indictment of the way the Chinese state is right now. The situation in Xinjiang. Recently, it emerged that some human hair, thought to be from inmates in these concentration camps, had been discovered. I don't know if that was in a factory production line, i.e., if it was meant to be sort of used as a wig, or I don't know particularly the details of that, but and any one of these things, the persecution of the Uyghurs, I mean, all the focus has been on Hong Kong, but what's happening in Hong Kong, grave as it is an inkling of what's happening in Xinjiang. I mean, Xinjiang is the largest scale incarceration of people for their ethnicity, possibly since the Holocaust. I mean, we can think of the killing fields in Cambodia and other lamentable chapters of the 20th century, but in terms of scale, the conservative figures are 1 million people. Some estimates go up to 3 million, and even if that's an exaggeration, it's unquestionably a very large number of people in these so-called re-education centres. China claims that they closed in December 2019. That's debatable. Um, but we're going to see a lot of threats from Beijing. We're going to see a lot of tantrums. We're going to see a lot of victimhood peddling, and don't put it past them to pull the race card to say that it's xenophobic and racist. I think this is all the more reason to go ahead with this policy of giving a pathway for BNO people to settle here. I mean, realistically, a lot of them may not be able to get out of Hong Kong. There is a parallel with this in the 1970s when Idi Amin expelled Asians from Uganda. Many of them settled in the UK. Of course, on that occasion, Amin was expelling them. On this occasion, they are essentially fleeing because they don't want to live under a communist regime. It's really that simple. Um, I mean, Beijing's assurances account for absolutely nothing. They're liars. Liu Xiaoming is a liar. Xi Jinping is a liar. This is a regime that is built on lies. Because in Chinese Communist Party thinking, um, lying to foreigners is totally acceptable if it means maintaining power at home domestically. Um, so if we take a hard line, of course they're going to have a tantrum. Of course they're going to make a lot of noise about it. And this is a struggle. Last week, when we put a motion at the UN to condemn China's behaviour in Hong Kong, 26 countries backed the British motion. 57 countries opposed it. Very depressing. But when you consider a lot of those countries are smaller countries tied into the Belt and Road Initiative, that makes sense. Um, small Pacific Island nations or other smaller countries, I wouldn't be too judgmental of them because in some ways they really do rely on China. Now, bigger countries like Pakistan, in my view, have far less of an excuse. I mean, where's the Ummah, Islamic Brotherhood, where Pakistan's concerned? So whilst they'll burn Israeli flags on the streets of Karachi, they'll turn a blind eye to China. It's despicable. Um, I mean, it's absolutely lamentable. But now more than ever, we absolutely need to be in step with our allies, with New Zealand, Canada, Australia, the United States. And okay, Trump may have very cynical purposes for this trade war with China. It may be not nothing to do with human rights. It may be purely selfish American interests, right? Even if that's the case, it doesn't change the fact that this is not a regime we should be working with. I think the Johnson administration is finally starting to wake up to this. I think they were very slow in the beginning. In fact, I think pretty much every British government since the Thatcher and Major governments in the early 90s imposed sanctions Tiananmen Square, Blair, Brown, Cameron, May, and certainly in the early part of the Johnson administration, they were frankly appeasing the Chinese state, perhaps none more so than Cameron. Cameron and Osborne actively, I was looking at some newspapers from a few years ago, Cameron and Osborne 2015 were actively saying Britain is China's friend. We will be advocates for China. So I think the Cameron Osborne policy on China was dangerous. It was appeasement, sheer appeasement, and history may well come to judge Cameron as like Stanley Baldwin and Neville Chamberlain in the 1930s. I really don't think it is too much of an exaggeration, and I'm not suggesting that China is about to start a world war. That's not what I'm suggesting. But I do feel that it's comparable to the Soviet Union during the Cold War in terms of its power, in terms of its malevolent threat towards liberal democracies. I mean, we have to remember China today is a lot more powerful than it was in 1949. Mao was a grotesque dictator, but under Mao, China wasn't a particularly powerful country. It was a probably middle level power, far more powerful today. Um, so, as grotesque as Mao Zedong was, and as much as he was a mass murderer, in some ways, Xi Jinping is a bigger threat to the rest of the world, particularly to liberal democracies. We've been saying how China's been trying to undermine us for years. And for a long time, this was very subtle. And they'd use all the polite language when it came to diplomacy. I think they're starting to cast that aside. This so-called wolf warrior diplomacy that's sort of been going on over the last couple of years um, is now really starting to show its face. You know, when they described Australia as a piece of chewing gum on our shoes, I say they, it was the Global Times, but that's a state-run newspaper, so it's absolutely sanctioned by the Communist Party. Um, you know, that sort of language, they wouldn't have used that 10 years ago, at least not publicly. So they've got more assertive, they've got more confident, um, and more arrogant, more jingoistic. I'm pleased that there is going to be reviews of Huawei, but Johnson's plans to phase it out by 2029 is a bit of a joke, really. 9 years, a lot can happen. That's easily enough time for a large-scale cyber attack. Easily enough time for the Chinese state to infiltrate our national security. It comes down to considering the absolute absurdity of Johnson going ahead with that in the first place. I think it was a big mistake. And I don't accept this argument we have no choice. I mean, Japan and South Korea are major digital markets. Why can't we be looking there? Why do we have to rely on China? Um, Universities, again, I think British universities have been spineless when it comes to dealing with China. They have put investment and the need for international students over everything else. Um, they've turned a blind eye to the fact that Confucius Institutes have been undermining us. I mean, the University of Sheffield, I would single out. I think it's been particularly pandering to Beijing. Um, Ofcom, I'm furious with Ofcom. Their weak, watered down response they gave me the other day, that they are minded to give CGTN a warning, it's meaningless. I want to see action. I want to see action, and that watered down, weak response is just not good enough. Now, if something happens in the next few months and Ofcom revokes CGTN's license, then I'll think, okay, finally you've done the right thing. but I'm afraid I'm not optimistic. Ofcom, in my opinion, has been very weak so far. Very weak. They issued RT with a fine, good, but they've done next to nothing about CGTN. Why does this matter? It matters because CGTN is the voice of the Chinese state. It's directly controlled by the Communist Party. Um, I mean, they have broken a lot of the criteria that Ofcom has laid out. Um, they've aired forced confessions. I think it's repugnant that they have headquarters in Chiswick in West London. Personally, I would like to see the likes of CGTN suffer a major cyber attack because I think we are in a Cold War here, and I think we need to hit back. I think we need to really say you cannot just make these demands. You cannot insult us. You cannot undermine our democracy. By the way, that comment about a cyber attack, I'm not saying I would do it because I don't know how to, right? But I do think there needs to be a bit of blowback. Australia recently suffered a large scale attack, almost certainly from China. Now, as far as I'm concerned, an attack on Australia is an attack on the UK. An attack on Canada is an attack on the UK. I think we haven't been coordinating anywhere near enough with our Five Eyes partners. And it's just pathetic. I love my country, but one thing I do get very frustrated with is that we tend to sit on the fence until the last minute. We tend to observe. We tend to procrastinate until it's too late. I think we need to be a lot more robust, including, by the way, robust language. I'm tired of this weakened, watered down diplomatic language that we're disappointed or we don't approve of this or we have concerns. I honestly think that we need to deal with the Chinese regime the way they are approaching everyone else. This is a regime that only respects strength. So we need to hit back. We need to, they come out with a jingoistic insult against us. We need to hit right back. We need to publicly call them liars. If it even means solid fact based accusations, which might be insulting, so be it. I'm not saying just flex muscles for the sake of it, because I don't think it's for the sake of it. I think at this point, it's necessary. It is absolutely necessary. And I still fear that we are not doing anywhere near enough. And the phone's going. But this has to change.